Welcome back to More Than a Lumpy Jumper. This week we're talking about something many of us hate, criticism. Bobby and I discuss our experiences and coping mechanisms for a lifetime of struggling literally bodily with accepting criticism with grace. And yet, it is something that we as leaders need to be able to receive and to give. So, come and join in our discomfort and have a listen to Being Critical of Criticism.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to More Than a Lumpy Jumper. Hello, Bridge.
Hi, Bobby. I just muted myself because I was burping.
What an amazing start. Well, as we've said, this is the realness of leadership in all its way, shapes and form and bodily functions, clearly.
I just, one of those garlic, like my garlic supplements in it. It's one of those ones that says, oh, it doesn't, give you garlic burps or anything, and it definitely does.
Oh my God. So this is also the episode where there's going to be too much information going on as well, but that's fine too. So inner mist, garlic breath, burping, and anything else that comes to mind. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about criticism. And all joking aside, actually, not necessarily burping, but criticism is a whole body exercise, in my view. There are so many things that go on alongside the emotions, how we interact with criticism, how we behave as a result of it, things that we actually say. I mean, we are opening up a Pandora's box, and this might be because it's about my world that I'm saying this, but criticism to me opens up a Pandora's box, and I'm wondering what it's like for you too, Bridge.
Well, I'm actually really looking forward to chatting to you about this, Bobby, because I hate criticism. And while I've done quite a lot of work with people on, and how you deal with criticism, I really, 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 really struggle with criticism. And I kind of looked into it a little bit about people who have ASD or have ADHD. Criticism then becomes even more difficult to deal with from the readings that I've done. And I like the fact you talk about it being a whole body issue, because some of the things I've been reading about people with ADHD, for example, is that it actually, criticism can be physically painful as well as, and I'm sure it's not just for people with ADHD, but there's quite a lot of research to suggest that people with ADHD have a particular sensitivity to criticism. And so I'm super interested to hear about some of the somatic things, because, I found loads of articles about how you deal with criticism, how you handle criticism. And obviously lots of very sensible things about not personalizing, not taking it personally and taking time to reflect. But that's all easily said and done in my experience, because the moment I get criticism, all of those rational, emotional intelligence things go absolutely out the window, and my monkey brain just comes rattling forward as if there's a banana being held out to it. And all of those great plans, all of those great learnings and preparations just fucking disappear out the window, and I go into a meltdown.
Well, that makes two of us. And I think probably, whilst I was thinking about this, I have done some research, but I decided that probably some of the best research was to actually sit and take a good look at myself and the sort of the episodic relationship I have with criticism even now, because I'd love to tell you that I am healed. I am not. It can still have a monumental triggering effect on me, and it's more about how I've learnt to deal with it. So if I think all the way back, and again I say there can be moments when this person still rears their head. I'm not going to say ugly head, because it's part and parcel of who I am, but I know that I have a real penchant for the sulky teenager self when it comes to criticism, where I will bitch and moan about the absolute audacity of the person for what they've said, never to their face, but anybody else is willing to listen. I get really defensive, self-righteous. I'll argue my point. I'll be, just the whole lot about all the things that they've got wrong about the situation. I will sulk and refuse to speak to the perpetrator. So the whole silent treatment, and I'm an absolute master at it. They've got no idea that this is going on. But in my little world, I'm not speaking to them. And I don't take any accountability or responsibility for what's actually happened. Nothing to learn here. And I'm absolutely exhausted as a result of all of that. And even while I'm saying all of that, it still feels so bodily for me that all of that is still there under the surface, quite capable of leaking itself out. And there were two stories I was going to tell. There was that before I started my coaching practice and my coaching development. And in fact, I'm going to tell that one second, because when I say that this has been quite a recent phenomenon still happening, I was an absolute nightmare in my last role, because the boss somehow managed to trigger me constantly, where I felt easier becoming the sulky teenager again, which doesn't have a very good look on a senior leader, I have to say. But the difference was that whilst it might happen in the moment, I was able to come back from it quite quickly, whereas before it could go on for days. And the reason I tell the coaching one second, even though it happened before that, was that I was given some feedback on a coaching session that I felt had gone quite well. I was feeling good in myself. The coaching guest client was smiling and nodding and had been really receptive to all the things that I'd actually been saying. And then the bloody observer got involved. And one of the things that they actually said in amidst giving this feedback was, I don't have to tell you all the things that you've done well, have I? We'll just take that as given. Let's just get to where you can improve. Ooh. And of course I was like, no, it's not fucking all right, because I do need some level of assurance. This is the first time I'm starting to coach, so it would have been really good to hear about some of the things that I was doing well. And I realise now that I wasn't confident enough in my own ability to be able to assure myself of the things that I'd felt in the moment. I let them be absolutely dissipated by what somebody else had said.
Yeah.
And so, I'll stop so that you can interject, because I could go on forever about this. But from my own research, it's sulky teenager still readily there. I still have a very precarious relationship with feedback. And I really have to work quite hard with all of the somatic practices that I have undertaken, not to be utterly grabbed by it, but to remember all the things that I have been learning on the way, keep the volume up on my own level of assurance of where I feel okay, but equally open in a space to go, there's something to learn here because this person is trying to help me. And the final thing that I will say, there's a lot of people out there who really are trying to help you. There are also tossers with their own insecurities who are trying to make you feel bad. And the whole thing about being settled in yourself is that you'll know the people that you want to be receptive to with their feedback, and the others that you can just continue to ignore and be a little bit self-righteous about.
Yeah, I think I'm preaching to the choir here. I found this article called 7 Strategies Smart Leaders Use to Handle Criticism. And actually a lot of what you're saying, and a lot of stuff that, as I've said, and you said, I think we know what we're supposed to do, but it's actually really hard. And it's not easy to do if you don't practice it. And I know for myself that when I get criticism, as I said, my monkey brain, the front of my brain, the processing bit, the thinking bit, the intelligent bit, I just go into fight flight response immediately. And I can feel like the whole, everything sort of shuddering up my body up to my shoulders start to hunch up. Probably my fists start to be made as well. And I really struggle to get words out at that point. And so the idea is, first of all, you're not supposed to take it personally. Then you're supposed to process it. Then you're supposed to ask for maybe some additional information if you're struggling to understand exactly where the criticism is. But I think your most important point, and all of those things are really difficult if you've gone into monkey brain and actually you can't process anything. All you're doing is like, I either need to kill you or I need to run away. I'm not sure which. and I can't speak. And so you then start to feel like an idiot because you're like, well, certainly I do. It's like, I can't put words together. And so I'll give you an example. And I guess it was a criticism. I was just been driving around the Highlands and we went to Skye. And there's a part of the island called the Quirang, where it's all single tracked roads. And there's about 75 billion other cars coming, particularly really large. And I'm not exaggerating. There's literally 75 billion. I counted them. Large camper vans, all sort of bucking, trying to go in all kinds of directions. And I was driving along, and you're supposed to pull into these passing spaces. And so I was keeping a distance behind this other car in front of me. There was a camper van in front of me, little camper van, not an enormous one. And I could see ahead of me that there were about 3 vehicles, 2 of which were camper vans, were sort of all pulled into the same passing space, and they're not designed for that. Anyway, so I held back to let them sort their shit out without me being up the arse of this other vehicle so that nobody could maneuver. And so I waited for a bit, and it was totally unclear what was going on. And so I was like, I don't know, should I wait here? Should I go forward? And then the vehicle in front kind of called me forward. So I came forward. The camper van the little camper van in front of me was trying to maneuver past these other 3 who were taking up the whole of the passing space, making it virtually impossible. And so they kind of squeezed through, and I got there, and there was a massive, massive pothole on the left. And so I was just driving very slowly so that I didn't trash the car because it was a hire car. And this woman from the camper van behind the first car, another camper van, came out. And I thought she was coming to help to sort of guide me to make sure that I could get through. And instead she came and started screaming at me that I was holding everyone up and that until I moved, they couldn't move. She was just like this yelling, and I was so like, what the fuck? And my brain,
oh my God.
I don't know. And I was trying to say to her, I'm really aware of that. I'm just trying to deal with this problem so I don't break my car and then block this for everyone else. She wouldn't let me finish. She was just yelling at me and, effectively saying I was useless. And I just could feel it. My brain, I couldn't get the words out. And Mohammed was sat next to me going, fucking hell, it's the first time I've ever seen my wife not be able to speak. So instead of having any sort of sensible or rational conversation, I just wound down the window and I just said, fuck off, you stupid fucking cow. and she turned around and walked back in and got back in. Just like chin on the floor. This woman in the car sort of alongside me, American lady, she wound down the window and said, hey, you're doing fine. I just sort of was like, thank you. And then just drove off. And Mohammed after was like, I have never seen you swear at someone in public. And I was so angry and just so like, fucking hell, who the hell? I was trying to do my best and all I got was this bloody woman yelling at me. So yeah, that's that's how well I deal with criticism.
But again, here's the thing. That's the difference between somebody who is offering you feedback that is useful versus something that you just really didn't need to hear.
Yeah.
And so those whole things, because I'm with you. The where I get to, or I try to get to from the inside out, with breathing and centering and remaining open so that you can hear things that are being said and staying curious. All of those things are wonderful. And sometimes I'm able to do that. But I kid you not, whilst I am doing that, I am boiling hot. I am red in the face. I could possibly be on the verge of tears because it's still so hard for me to hear and receive when I'm much more configured to give rather than receive.
Yeah.
But there needs to be an acceptance. The only thing that I have learned is that there is an acceptance of who we actually are, and then we have some level of choice. So I do try to do all of that, but I think the outside in bit is, I often like to control the feedback. I mean, I know you couldn't with that example, but do your own self-reflection first. And rather than being really beating yourself up about stuff, What do I really believe that I've done well that I can actually hold on to, so that you give yourself that own assurance element to it. And the thing in this example that you're just giving as well is that it's just their assessment. It's not true.
Yeah.
She thinks you're doing a shit job. You clearly didn't have everybody in the audience thinking the same thing. Otherwise, the American lady wouldn't have wound down her window. Mo didn't either, with where he was in the situation. And it's really just their assessment. And so there is a level of that. One of the things that I try and hold on to in the fog of it is it's not necessarily true. It's their assessment, and I'm entitled to have a different one.
Yeah, I like that. And continuing on the article, it said very similar things, that one of the assessments that you need to make in your time to process is this constructive? So that's the first one. And I think that that's really important. And I think we forget it sometimes. There's a whole spectrum of criticism, I guess. I see a lot of people talking about, oh, they're a hater, so-and-so's a hater. And I think that, first of all, there's disagreement. So sometimes it's not criticism, it's just disagreement. And disagreement isn't criticism, although some people perceive it as such. And I think we'd had a chat with Alison about, some of the issues of resilience in Gen Alpha and Gen Z, about that they perceive that any form of disagreement is actually a criticism. And so I think we need to be careful about that. Disagreement isn't hating. But then there's also, is this actually constructive, or is this just some, as you said, some bastard who just wants to be mean or unhelpful, or isn't aware of all the facts? And so it's really important to be able to take that time and not have your monkey brain just clouding over and making you want to shout fuck off at people, but to actually go, where on the spectrum is this? And this idea of asking for a bit more clarification if you are feeling that maybe the whole context isn't being reflected in the criticism. But also then, as you said, at some point you balance up, I know that I've done this well. I know that this was the intention. I know that this is what I've been trying to do. But is there a valuable insight that I can take away from what's being said? Is there something here that will help me to grow? And maybe I find that bit and accept it as a gift. And that's really often hard to do. But then the final bit is, you can listen as a leader. You can listen to everybody. You're supposed to be listening to everyone. But how much value you attribute to things and to what's said is your choice. And actually, in some elements, I will accept, or I would value insight from some people, but there are other people whose insight I don't particularly value. So, some things you just have to let go. And then others, if they come from someone that you value in your life and that you trust and respect, then maybe that's the time, even if you don't react immediately well to it, is to, in your time where because I'm one of those people who'll walk away and have to think about it. And, maybe an hour later, I'll be sitting there going, oh God, they were right. Oh yeah. Okay. That was a fair point. And then have to come back and say, hey, I take all of those things, or I take that one point and I'd really, I'd like a bit more information as to maybe what can happen about that. So I think that there's this issue of actually, as you said, choosing how you deal with it and which bits you deal with and which bits you just go, okay, I'm just going to let that one fly away somewhere. I think Brené Brown, Saint Brené, has a lovely short talk about why your critics aren't the ones who count. And she talks a lot about the meanness of some of the feedback, inverted commas, that she received after going viral with her first vulnerability TEDx talk, and then how she dealt with that and actually sifted through to the getting rid of the haters or the nasty, badly intentioned criticism, which often was very personal rather than actually relating to anything that she'd talked about, to see if there were any elements or any people who were giving this criticism or this feedback who were of value or were worthy of respect. And I think it's a really important message for people, especially people who are sensitive to criticism, to be able to first of all go, okay, I need to be able to understand who I would want to take stuff from and who I just need to just let it wash over me.
No, I agree. And I'm absolutely with you in the reflection piece, where you're saying that you need to go away and potentially stew on it a bit and then maybe return. And my question was going to be whether that's a learned thing as you've moved through adulthood or whether it's always been like that. Because I think the step change for me was this utter collapse. You know, if I think all the way back to school, anything where I didn't do well at, I would fold in on myself and wouldn't go back to, you know, I found it difficult to have work marked and I just couldn't hear anything. I was absolutely closed off and engulfed by an emotion that I hadn't done well enough. And if we go back to dearest Brené, you know, is there a level of shame in that, you know, I don't know where it came from, but couldn't handle it at all. And so the best thing for me to do was to go on the attack, but never directly at them. Whilst everybody thinks I'm very confrontational at times, and I can be now, at the time I would tell everybody else. And you've known me in my younger years when that was going on. You know, I'd be catastrophizing about something that really wasn't a big deal, but never actually dealing with it directly. And so never got into that reflection piece. Whereas now to articulate that I know that I'm heating up and I might not be capable of having the conversation straight away, I have enough about me now to say, can I think about it and come back and talk to you later? And then get the hell out of Dodge. So I can still then go and rail around somewhere, calm myself down, say, what the hell are you up to? And then get back in there and go, okay, I've cleared the space. I can hear this now. And I think the courage has come from, I couldn't do it there and then because I really struggle with all of this. And I know that, here's the thing, I'm going back in to talk to people who I know are well-intentioned, who I want to listen to. That's your point about the selective part of it. There are other people where I may well have said, can I come back and check in with you about this later? And then I never go back.
Yeah.
Because I've decided to disregard it.
Yeah.
That might be a great thing to do, but we have a choice.
Yeah.
We always have a choice.
I do exactly the same as you initially, which is that rejection, don't want to hear it, sort of just go into my, no, or push back and say, I just don't agree. I don't agree. That's just rubbish. But for me, I then tend to, and I always have gone back and it mulls over in my head. And then I'm like, oh God, that's right. I think what I've learned to do, what I didn't used to do would be to go back. Then I would just sit there and go, they were right and bollocks. And then I feel this shame of how I reacted. Why can't I be more mature? Why can't I accept that, you know, that this well-intentioned thing? I think as I've got older, now I am able to sort of bite my pride, and because there's a big element of pride in it, I guess, as well, and the shame, and get over the shame and go and say, hey, you know, I really appreciate what you said. I know it was well intentioned, and I think I am ready now to accept or to talk about what it was that you wanted to talk about. But yeah, I think that's the difference. That the difference is the going back. Whereas when I was younger, I just would mull over it, and I would, in my head, I'd know that they were right, and I would probably then try and change, like rectify it myself. To, you know, I'm aware of it now. I will try and not do that again, or I'll try and do that differently. But I wouldn't let the person who'd kindly given me the gift know that actually that it had landed at any point. Whereas now I do try and let people know that it landed, even if I was very ungracious about it at the beginning.
The other thing that springs to mind for me as well is that, I mean, there's a few things running through my head as you were talking about how you've got about it. Because first thing is, oh, Bridget and I seem to be in the same camp as this. Wouldn't it have been a good idea to have a guest on who's good at accepting criticism. But then again, it's tricky, isn't it? Because is it criticism? Is it feedback? Is it in a word? Whatever it might be. So that was the first element to it. I also think that it would be worthwhile us exploring as leaders as to what else we have actually done. And I think that there's a distinction here for me, because I think the stuff that we have been talking about so far is unsolicited feedback, criticism, where we haven't asked.
Yeah.
It's just arrived. So we are clearly not in control and not expecting it. Versus, I know that I have had plenty of occasion where I have asked for feedback. And I am also the person, when I've been in situations where the glorious 360-degree survey is done, that I go out of my way to find the people that I'm sure are not just going to blow smoke up my arse. Because otherwise, what's the point of doing it?
Yeah.
So there is an interesting thing for me, is that, if it's like in a controlled environment, I will go looking for it. How is that landing with you? What else? What have I forgotten? All of that. I'm really good at doing that with teams, but when it's unsolicited and I'm not expecting, it can absolutely sucker punch me.
Yeah. And I think I still struggle with, even with stuff that I've sought out. I don't know that I think maybe I'm afraid, because I know how I've generally reacted, that I'm afraid to actually solicit feedback, because I don't know whether I'll be, professional in receipt of it. However, to be fair, when I've done 360s, I think I cope with it a lot better when it's a third party. So when the coach has been talking, because whenever I've done 360s, there's been a coach to talk you through the document.
Result.
I think sometimes receiving that document can be a bit of a, oh God, ouch. Whereas actually, if there's a coach then to talk through some of the things, and where you can say, actually, I was really surprised by that and kind of disappointed, and now I'm feeling, I'm confused, because I thought that was something I did well, or I was expecting that actually, and I know that that's already something that I'm going to be working on. And I suppose maybe as I think about it, when I've had that sort of solicited feedback and it's something I already know that I need to work on, it doesn't feel like criticism, because I've already self-criticized. I've already done my analysis. I already know. I think that what's more difficult to deal with is where it's something that I actually think I'm doing quite well at, and the feedback is, actually, you're not doing as well as you thought. I struggle with that. But with a coach, I've found it easier to sort of work through and decide how I'm going to cope with that without going into that massive self-critical loop, which I think sometimes I get into. What I found interesting in some of the articles, and I know you say that maybe we should have had someone on who deals with criticism well, but if I'm honest, I think that most people don't.
We're dealing. I was going to say, we're dealing with it, love. I mean, we're being very honest, and I would absolutely hope that the people are listening to this are going, "Oh God, yes, there I am," because I think it's hard for all of us.
Yeah.
And I think the key things are the discernment about what will be useful to us and what isn't, rather than thinking that you've got to take it all in. And then how quickly you bounce into a good emotional state to do something with it. Because there is also that with the solicited feedback of knowing something, but the what are you going to do about it? There's two things with that. It's like the knowing because I've heard that before, or I know that about myself. And I think the coach piece is then good about, well, you might know it in your head, but what are you doing about it bodily? So there's the one. And now I've completely forgotten what the second thing was that I was going to say about that. It will come back to me. But I think that there is that element to it about you don't have to accept it all, and how quickly you recover.
I think the other point, or one of the points in some of the articles that I read, which really does confirm to me that I think that a lot of people do struggle with this. And I think there are maybe some superhuman people who are able to go, oh yeah, come on, tell me all the things that are bad about me. But as a leader, I think lots of people will say, oh yeah, I'm open to feedback. We're all equal here to have input. And actually people don't mean that at all. So part of the article was that in a lot of cases, people who give feedback or who think it's invited and so therefore they give it, actually then suffer in their careers because of it, because there's an element of likability. And we haven't really talked about likability, but I think that it can impact on leadership, that some people, I think generally as people, we like to be liked. And actually that isn't necessarily always the role of a leader. It's not to be actively disliked, obviously, but it being liked is not the goal. But there is an element of in a team and in how things sort of muddle along, that people who are seen to be giving feedback stroke criticism often can be seen as troublemakers, and that people then view them as not so good at teamwork, which is really unfair, because if you are invited to give feedback and you give feedback and then you're judged for it, I think that's kind of really, really not cool. But generally the article was saying, actually leaders who say, oh yeah, feedback, criticism, whatever, really don't like it. They don't enjoy it. They're not ready for it. And actually, as a leader, if you are going to ask for feedback, you need to make sure you're bloody ready to accept it. And that might be in terms of limiting unsolicited feedback, or if you ask for feedback, making sure that you're emotionally stable in the nicest possible way. But you're not having a bad day, you haven't had a row with your husband, your dog didn't pee on your bed, or whatever it is, that you haven't had a row with your toddler about whether or not they're allowed to wear their sparkly unicorn dress to school, that you are in a place where you can do all of the things that we're talking about, to do the process, making sure you don't take it as personal, that you actually can have a conversation about things to clarify whether or not this is a valuable insight that's going to help things grow, or whether or not this is just somebody bitching and moaning about something. Because I think one of the things is that criticism has the potential to stifle creativity and innovation if it is done badly, but also if it's received badly. So I think that in order for feedback, criticism, if you can't receive it well, then it also has the potential, if it sends you into a shutdown, as it has done for you in the past and often does to me, to suddenly go, oh, well, I'm not going to do that anymore. I tried this and it didn't work and I didn't succeed. I wasn't perfect. Then that's it. I'm just never going to do that again. I think that, so that there's this potential, if you can't receive it well, but also if you can't give it well, that it has this really, really stifling effect on change, on growth, on innovation and creativity.
Yeah. And I think with all of that, it's practice. So where you see the things that says, well, to be able to receive it, centering and being grounded and breathing and staying open, etc., that doesn't just happen. And you're never just the only person in this, because as a leader, you are sometimes on the receiving end, more often on the giving end, to your team, etc. And, and I've done some of this, so I don't want to sound like an idiot who's going, oh, and then you do this and then you do that. But here's just the thought of it, in terms of all sorts of different ways of practice. But again, from my learning, I had to become much more self-aware before I could get any better. So to know what happens to me bodily and to accept what I used to look like in the past when I was doing this, but to know that I'm still susceptible of that there's where the self-awareness starts from. I think that there are moments, and clearly for you in the car the other day, the same for you as well, that sometimes you can't always do it in the moment. You can't always be the best acceptor of feedback, criticism in the moment. And sometimes there's got to be a level of self-reflection. You can't self-reflect if you're not very self-aware. And then in self-reflecting, you've got to be able to assure yourself. So there was an example you gave where you said, I was really gutted because I thought I was doing, it was when you say about the 360 feedback, where you said those things that come out that you think, oh shit, I thought I was doing quite well at that. I think that's the moment to reflect on that, to reassure yourself, because that doesn't necessarily mean because you've had that piece of feedback that the thing that you thought you were doing well, you need to throw out. There might need to be a minor tweak to it because it hasn't been received well in the way, but it doesn't necessarily mean that all the things that you have believed about yourself aren't true.
Yeah, that's
Again,
very
it's back
important.
to it. It's back to it just being about their assessment. But in this level of practice, I can't think where I was reading it the other day, but the practice can go in very different ways depending on where you feel you are at with all of this. So you might be a leader who is better able, if that's good English, to take that feedback in private. So in which case you only go there. I mean, you can't do anything about the unsolicited stuff, not really, but you can set things up better. So in one-to-ones, talk to me about when I do this or whatever it might be, so that you are giving the people the invitation to say things. You will find the people in your teams who are pretty good at doing that. And again, to your point about the people that you are more readily able to accept feedback from. So when you then get into team meetings, with their permission, you say, I'm going to be asking the question again. I'd like you to say it in front of the rest of the group. So you then learn to actually hear it in a wider circle. And it is also giving people an invitation, other invitations to do it, but having heard it from people that you are readily accepting it from. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so you can build up to a town hall briefing where you have people in there that you know that are going to say things, but you don't start there.
Yeah.
If you're going to be someone who's going to go red on the stage and say, well, you can all fuck off then, that might not be the place to do it. But it starts with this level of awareness about what capacity have I got to hear it.
Yeah. I love that idea of that sort of practice of doing it in private. So you've already heard it. You've already had your time to process. You have given validity, because I think one of the things that maybe we haven't dealt with is that people giving that criticism, when they are doing it from a place of love, not when they're doing it just because they want to, they're keyboard warriors or whatever, or they just like to moan. Actually, that's quite scary too, particularly if you're giving that feedback to someone who is more senior to you, or to someone that you do love and doesn't receive it well. I think that there's a courage there as well for them to have made that step. And so I do think that you also, in your preparation, are making it clear to that person that you value it, even if you both know that it's difficult. But I had never thought about that idea of then repeating in a slightly bigger public forum in front of the team, so that one, you're modeling, even if you had to practice it a couple of times before you do it in public, but that you're modeling the receipt of feedback / criticism, so that you're modeling that it's okay to give that, albeit, I guess, as long as you are still setting it within that framework of, please come and see me privately so we can so we can discuss it before you want to. I don't know how maybe you would set that up in terms of you're modeling, yes, it's okay to receive feedback, but you're not encouraging them then to start just throwing stuff at you randomly whenever you step outside your door. But I do like the idea of it being repeated in the public forum, so that you're then modeling the receipt of it and the other person, and modeling that it's okay.
Yeah, and that's all about the boundary setting, because it may well be that the person who is willing to be quite vulnerable with you, to be the giver, is fine doing that in a private forum. They may well be all right doing it in the team forum, and then they're like, well, hang on a minute, town hall briefing, I don't think so. But if you've settled this in yourself, and this is about the I knowing to I am doing, because there can also then be the presentation of it, of that I'm sure so and so won't mind me telling you that the other day we were having a conversation and they brought X to my attention that I'd been doing. If anybody else has had the same experience, it's not necessarily an apology, or what I'm going to do to try and improve on that situation is the following.
Yeah.
And then you can be held to account on that because it's been said out loud. It's been said in a much wider space. And I've done some of that. And whilst the unsolicited still can pull a rug out from underneath my feet, I have become a better leader for every now and again. And I'm not talking about this being a daily occurrence, for Christ's sake. I don't get that much criticism. I'll get some, as everyone should. But the pieces that I think that need to be bettered, I have gone out of my way to do so, and quite publicly, which is a very vulnerable thing to do. But it makes it okay for other people to either make mistakes or not have got it quite right, or whatever it might be. And that we can share in all of that without castigating each other or making each other feel small or having me feeling completely choked up because I've been thrown under a bus.
Yeah. But it also, as you said, I think one of the really important elements of it is that you showing that vulnerability, or as a leader showing that vulnerability and that willingness to listen and take on board valid criticism / feedback also is this great model to the members of your team in order to show them how they can receive feedback. Because we've acknowledged that everybody struggles with it. And actually, if you're in a team and they see how the leader deals with that experience, is also a good lesson for them when they actually see good ways of receiving criticism modeled in front of them in public. So that, and I'm not saying that's suddenly going to make them go, oh yeah, it's easy now. Next time I get criticism, but it might be a place for them to open up, so that when you talk with them about, okay, we're going to do some feedback, or this is our one-to-one, or how do you want to deal with feedback? They might then be able to have a conversation about how they receive criticism and maybe how they maybe want some assistance in better dealing with criticism because they've seen that you can.
Yeah, absolutely. I think back to the two stories that I told at the beginning with the lack of constructive element to it from the coaching observation. And then perhaps, with being triggered as much as I was in the senior position that I was in, because I was made to feel really inferior. And I guess I think that is also a choice piece as well, where you are allowing yourself to be made to feel inferior because you aren't settled as to how good you really are in particular things. So I go back to that piece, and I think that's where one of my questions was for you with, oh God, I hadn't seen that. I thought I was quite good at that. How do you explore a piece of feedback that you don't really want to accept because you think you're absolutely fine? I suppose that's the point of a yes and conversation, going back to a previous episode, because otherwise it could be quite closed down. Well, yeah, thanks for that piece of feedback, but I think I do that very well already, versus a thanks for that piece of feedback and I'd like to explore it further.
Yeah, I think that, so there's two things for me that come out of that. I think one of the things is that as a leader with your team, there needs to be an element of, we talked a while ago about, that you need to have 6 pieces of positive feedback to outweigh any one piece of negative feedback. And I think that, creating a place where criticism and feedback are well received and well given also has to be within the context of there generally being a positive sense of constructive criticism or just positive feedback, generally, to celebrate the wins, to celebrate the strengths, to reinforce those. Because I think that much as, yes, of course, we need to be able to do that ourselves and to recognize what we're good at and our strengths and to be able to put things into perspective. I think that if you are in a context or an environment where that is done regularly by other people, as well as allowing you to do that. I think it's easier to do if you are generally receiving reassurance elsewhere. I do take the point that, we get to a point where we should be able to do that ourselves. But as a leader, I think you should be creating that environment anyway. And then there was another thing that I was going to say, which I can't remember. Oh, yeah, I guess absolutely the idea of curiosity in terms of when you are in that position of receiving a form of criticism. And the curiosity is twofold, isn't it? First of all, is this constructive? Is this actually coming from a place of good intention and love, etc.? Is there something valuable I can take away from this? And secondly, do I need to ask more questions? Because, actually, this is surprising to me. And so maybe I need to understand better. Is this you are absolutely shit at the whole element? Or is this an occasion where I didn't do as well as maybe I have done in other occasions? Or, as you said, is this just a small part of other things that I do well? And so actually to be able to have a rational conversation to help understand where this particular criticism is coming from. And then you can balance it against your experience and of, well, actually, previously I've been told this, previously I've done this, previously I know that I've done this well. You can then do the balance and the proper reflection of where it fits into the spectrum of what sort of work you need to do, I guess.
The other thing that I would add is the curiosity on self, because although I've said in this episode that there is a level of acceptance about my bright red face and heat and my throat feeling like it's closing up, etc., I still don't ever take all of that for granted, so that I stay curious in that to see how long it lasts, the level of it, so that your reaction to it, it's worth being curious about that as well, because whilst I've almost intimated that it's always the same, it isn't always the same. It's just a lot of it every now and again.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point to sort of see, do I react always? Is it with one particular person that I react in a particular way? Is there something about that person that's particularly triggering? I guess family members sometimes can be more triggering than other things. So, or the other way around. So yeah, I think that's really a really important point. And I think we're coming to the end, Bobby.
We are. I have got a quote.
Awesome.
In fact, I've got two. Huh? And I'm going to put this in the resources as well. This great little YouTube video from the Wisdom for Life called Dealing with Criticism, which they've done as a sort of like a video infographic going on, talking about a lot of the things that we've spoken about. And that's where the quote has come from. And they say from Eleanor Roosevelt, who was heard to say, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent."
Yeah, nice one.
And then the other one was, "What you think of me is none of my business."
Yeah, I like that one too. I like both of those. Thank you, Bobby. That's been really, really helpful. I shall be spending more time being curious about my reaction to criticism.
But you still can tell people to fuck off when they come and tell you to move your car.
She absolutely deserved it. She was a massive Karen.
She absolutely. I don't know who you are, Karen, but...
She effectively was just saying, you need to get out of my way because I've waited longer than I wanted to wait. So, yeah.
Outrageous.
Yeah. You should not know who I am.
On that note, no, exactly. Self-righteous to the end. And on that note...
See you next week.
Take care.
Bye. Thanks for listening. All of the resources are available for your delectation on morethanolumpyjumper.com and our Spotify podcast page. Despite our assertions during the episode, we are always open to constructive feedback and criticism, so do drop us a line. Next week, we're talking about emotional intelligence. Is it necessary for leaders? Is it always a force for good? Can it be learned? And lots of other questions. So join us next week for Being a Full EQ.